Fred Davis. Vicki Hernandez. Mary Hess. Here. Terry Millette.
Here.
Victoria Newport.
Here.
Rick Smith.
Here.
Howard Solomon.
Here.
All right, just gonna stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have public participation, public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not in order. Next up, we have board committee reports and correspondence.
Okay, I'll say something about the
All
curriculum
right.
council. Went there Thursday and learned a great deal about the biliteracy program. There was a good presentation. I have copious notes from this, but I'm not going to tell you everything that I learned, but evidently we're doing quite a broad job with that program, and there's hopes to do better even next year. Let's see, there was something about the algebra team and new materials. That was rather extensive. In fact, the whole evening was a lot about assessment and how we're going to incorporate a new curriculum, align it with Common Core and Park, and at the same time improve some of the offerings. There was also something about the assessments, and I suppose probably a lot of people know that the assessments aren't all perfect. For instance, the Next Gen Science, there are things that are missing. If you go on to the college level, ACT and SAT, which used to be the standards, are maybe not going to be any longer. Yet there's nothing currently that replaces those. So anyway, we learned a good bit about various kinds of assessment, more so at the high school and elementary, middle school levels, not as much at the higher education, but of course we feed into that. So anyway, it was a good evening, and I learned quite a lot. It was my second meeting with the Curriculum Council, and everyone there did a great job of presenting stuff.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to mention that I don't even know if our board members know, but this past Sunday, November 15th, was School Board Member Appreciation Day. And for that, our students and instructional coaches got together and they wanted to put together a short video for the board to show their appreciation. So, Cindy, oh, by the way, it's consistent with our theme. Our First Institute Day theme was working together. Thank you. Okay. Everybody remembers that.
The signs on mobile, so don't forget to turn the signs in.
I'll go we can put our assignment real quick in our Chromebook and we can check it. And the teachers have a blog.
I like how if they use them like at home, like if you forget a assignment, you can email your teacher if you forgot it. And it's usually much better than paper because you can lose the paper. And with the Chromebook, it's like always on there. So.
Thank you.
Thoroughly, and thanks to Denise Fleming for tying everything together.
I just wanted to mention really quick too, our swim team, our Sycamore DeKalb swim team has qualified 3 individuals for the state meet and also a relay for this weekend. So very proud of them for their accomplishments and excited to see how they do. So. Okay. Next, under business and finance, the TIF City of DeKalb intergovernmental agreement. Andrea, and this is a informational item.
Correct. So we have been working with the city since actually spring, and we hope we have a final copy. I'm gonna turn it over to our attorney Dino to walk you through the process.
Sure. So you've been provided a copy of that intergovernmental agreement. I'm here to answer any questions for informational purposes. The attorney handling this for the city is Kathleen Orr. She's spoken to administration. She's waiting for final word back, but doesn't anticipate any problem with the terms we have in this agreement. One of the terms is that we should have substantial completion of all the improvements by the end of September of 2017. And we submit for reimbursement by that day also. So what the agreement indicates is indicated in the packet provided to you is a reimbursement of about $2 million of TIF eligible improvements. We've identified projects on page 3 for those improvements at both the Founders Elementary School and the Clinton Rosette Middle School. So it's a good deal for us in getting a couple $1 million out of that TIF. This is in addition to the surplus already granted on an annual basis that we get out of the TIF. Just from some background standpoint, the TIF was created back in December of 1986. It was originally scheduled to terminate in 09, the end of December of 09. And back then in 2007, an intergovernmental agreement went into with the support of the school district, where they actually extended their TIF to the end of December 2021. So that's when their TIF's currently scheduled to terminate unless they terminate it earlier on their own. The TIF currently, they're distributing about, I think it's $3 million a year, and they're distributing that as surplus, and they prorate that among the taxing bodies and reimburse, other agencies that put money in there. And I think we're receiving out of that TIF on an annual basis somewhere in the neighborhood of
1.5.
it was 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't able to find that quick enough. So this is in addition to that, and we believe we've identified these as being eligible improvements. We'll still have to, during the process, submit to them some invoicing, proof of payment, and we'll be reimbursed at the end of each of those projects. So we will have to float those dollars. That's the gist of it. I don't know if you have any particular questions about the agreement or any terms or any of the items that Andrea put in the board package for you.
Doesn't look like it. Thank you.
I'll be available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Next is the property tax abatement to 3M Corporation. And this is also an information item.
Actually, we have 3 of them, so I'm gonna just kind of cover
Okay.
all of these
Mhm.
at once, if you don't mind. So back in 2010, we actually had an agreement that we put together to entice businesses, commercial and industrial, to come into our community via a tax abatement program. Now, in light of all of this, if you haven't heard, and it was in the paper, we have now been approved for an enterprise zone. So this will kind of live out its life, but then the enterprise zone comes in and the intergovernmental agreement then will stop. But in the meantime, anyone who is approved continues on. So these companies right now that we're giving you as items, the first one actually is 3M, and they are in their third year of tax abatements, followed by Right Point, which was new actually this year coming on. You approved that last year, but this is their first year for their tax abatement. And then lastly is Panduit, and they're actually completed now. They are in the 5th year of the 5-year program. So, and you can see we have spelled out how much was actually abated and then how much we actually collected. On the Panduit one, just so that you know if the numbers don't quite make sense to you, it's because the abatement was only on the building addition, not on their full piece of property. And then at the next board meeting, we will actually take action on these items. Any questions?
In the action that we will take, what will it actually do? You know, the abatement is going to be there.
Yes.
It exists. What action is actually needed?
It's just a cursory kind of nod of, yes, you're accepting these numbers, that the abatements are going to them. Because we actually have approval of all of this through the intergovernmental agreement.
Anyone else?
So this is just be a formality in a
Yes.
sense, that already, nothing's changed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, we have presentations, the 2015 tax levy. That the Board of Education approved the proposed tax levy for the 2015 tax year for publication. This is action, discussion, information, and presentation.
Correct. So this actually starts the whole process of which we have to follow. All these guidelines and fall within these dates. But I will preempt this by saying that these numbers are all estimates at this point. Typically, from the supervisor of assessment, we have the majority of the books in from the assessor in DeKalb County. And there are some issues that are left outstanding. So these numbers may flex from one point to another. So just know at this point, they really are the best estimates that we could get from your office at this point. So starting, I'm going to turn it to Cindy.
So basically, just briefly go through the levy process. This is something we do annually this time of the year, and it really does start our budget process, like Andrea mentioned, because this is a big piece of our revenue. So we usually get about $46, $47 million from operating, and then also it pays for our bond and interest on our debt as well. So the levy process is basically, right now we're getting estimates. They complete in December and January the actual final assessed valuation numbers, because that is the big number we need in order to calculate what our tax levy is going to be. We adopt the levy in December. We'll be doing that at the December 15th meeting. There's a hearing that needs to happen. We always do it here because there is a very prescribed time level or calendar that we have to follow, so we always have to do it in these particular steps. The tax rates get established in March and April of 2016 when everything is completely finalized and everybody has their tax levies, and that we aren't the only taxing body. There's very many of them out there that also perform tax levies as well. In March and April, there's a revision process. We look at the levy and we can kind of move dollars around between the different funds at that time when we know what those actual rates are. And then the taxes from this particular levy get collected May through November, and we actually receive distributions starting in May of 2016 through November of 2016. And then that is revenue that we budget for and post into fiscal year 16-17. Even though we're getting some of the money in technically this fiscal year, we always push it into the next fiscal year.
And that, if I could just quickly, that's an important piece because So people understand, we actually set this up as deferred revenue. So the money we receive in this year is actually used to be spent for the following fiscal year. And not all school districts do that. So when you look at people's fund balances at year end, this piece makes a big difference. And so when you do those comparisons, by us doing this is a very conservative approach, that we are not spending money we received at the end of the year for the previous kind of months of expenditures.
And then it's about 50-50 too, so we'll be receiving about 50% of our tax levy before even this fiscal year ends. So we'll have the money in the bank, we just don't recognize that revenue until the next year.
So tonight, what you're actually doing is approving these estimates. So we will walk you through the whole riveting experience of how the levy
We should have
put together. A lot of numbers will look like it gets posted in the newspaper. Again, on December 15th is when the hearing will happen, and then you will adopt it and it gets filed with the county clerk's office.
So just some definitions here of kind of the major things that are part of the tax levy and how the rate gets established. There's a maximum rate, and the state establishes that based on for specific funds. So there's like the Ed Fund, the O&M Fund, and a couple of others that there is a maximum that we can levy for, that we cannot go over. That is the law. Now, due to our declining equalized assessed value, or EAV, those tax rates have been increasing over a number of years, actually for a lot of years, I mean, if you look at the history of it. And that really is a function of when the EAV is going down, the tax rate goes up, so we can still get the dollars, but based on a lower value. So you'll see kind of, and then conversely, it happens when that rate starts going, or the EAV starts going up, that rate should start ratcheting down a little bit. So based on the assessor's estimates that we have gotten for the 2015 tax year, that rate setting EAV has decreased over $218 million since 2008. So we've lost 26% in value within our district over that period of time. And that's just reflected, not just our district, but that's pretty much happened, probably not just the state, pretty much across the country. We do have good news, believe it or not, finally. The rate setting EAV that they're estimating for 2015 is a 2.06% increase from the previous year. So that's great news. That means that finally properties are starting to increase in value, as well as we have some new construction too. Also, but we still are in a situation, because that has dropped so much, where we have reached the legal maximums in a lot of our funds. So it's something we really have to watch carefully. Now, the limiting rate is the highest tax rate that can be levied for all funds combined. And that is really driven by PTEL is what it's called, and a lot of people call it tax cap, but it's technically really not. It caps what you can get from the previous year of the existing property. So we can't receive more than 5% or the consumer price index, whichever is less from the prior year, on existing property. So the next slide here is just a history of what our consumer price index has done, because this really drives how much money, additional dollars we can gain off of our tax levy on those existing properties. So you can see it's really been all over the board. I mean, 2006, 3.4. I mean, 1 year, almost 0, a 10%. In this levy year, we're at 0.8%. So really not a lot of additional revenue we're going to be able to generate just off existing property because of that 0.8. The average for actually that 10-year period is like a 2.13%. And even today, they just announced what the projected CPI, or the through October 12-month CPI is, and it's only 0.2% for this particular year for 2015. So we may be looking at another year next year when we're here from now, that maybe even less than that 0.8. And that's really driven by the price of gas and a couple of things, but that energy price really drives that. So we'll see where we're at now.
Oh, hold on, here comes the exciting part. So highlighted in the area is the estimate of what, now this is actually pushing things, overshooting what we have right now from the supervisor of assessment. And the reason why we do this is to make certain that if the numbers fluctuate from them, that we've captured everything that we possibly can. So, and at times people have referred to this as balloon levying, but the reason why you need to do this is if there is a number that you miss, you forever lose that in your tax levy. So that becomes accumulating effect from year to year to year. So right now, the numbers that we have up here for you is we are saying that in 2015, we'll say that the equalized assessed valuation is $631,958,000. We put $10 million in new construction in there, and that should be able to capitalize on any of the dollars that perhaps right now from the assessor's office, if they miss something, and from now until everything is finalized, that we are safe with all of these numbers. So in doing that, what we are actually looking at is to follow that all the way down to the bottom line, where it says total capped funds. In essence, what we are asking for is $40,045. So that is an increase. If you look at, I just want to put this right here, because this is what ends up becoming very important. Because that CPI, the 2.7 in 2010, moving down to 1.5 and then increasing up to the 3%, that's where the majority of your money moves with that CPI. So the lower that CPI is, the less of an increase from year to year you tend to see, unless you have a big amount of new construction coming out. Because the new construction is calculated outside of that CPI number. So just real quick, when we had moved from fiscal year 2010 to 2011, that was nearly $1 million increase in revenue right there. And that's, again, because of low CPI, not a great deal of construction, but moderate for what's happening during that Great Recession period of time. Then when we moved to when the CPI became higher, that was actually in 2012, we had a $1.7 million increase. So from less of $1 million to when that CPI goes up to 3% is when you're seeing these larger increases. And unfortunately, moving on out, and that's been our struggle, we've been a little over $860,000 new revenue from year to year because of that low CPI. And that being said, I know at times people think that sometimes the increase is due to the bonds that were issued. But if you look at the bond rates down at the bottom of the page, where you see bond and interest, that's creeping up just ever so slightly. In fact, that had moved from, let's see, starting in 2010, we were almost at 54 cents. In 2011, that moved up not even 10 cents, little less than 9. And today we're looking at about 76 cents. So that's not the driving factor really so much so as to moving that tax money as much as people think all those bonds are out there. It really is the bulk of the operating stuff that's hitting that tax rate. And Cindy, as she mentioned, and we can look and see where that actually lands, it's actually moving on the downtick because that EAV is finally climbing up a little bit. All yours. Oh, there should be.
Yeah, this is one. Okay, so this looks real similar to what Andrew explained, what was the levy request, what we actually are going to request, what we have to publish in the paper, and then what we have to file with the county clerk. This is more of based on the assessor's estimates that they have given us. And these are fresh numbers. I mean, we were on them. If we need these numbers, we need these numbers. So that's why it was kind of like getting in your packet, because we just really got the numbers yesterday to really go through and see exactly where we stand. So this is an estimate of that they gave us. So it shows here that based on their estimates, they're looking at a 625 million EAV, which is an increase of 2.06% from the previous year, with $3.7 million in new construction. And that is just, again, like Andrew mentioned as well, new construction is really where we're gonna see a larger increase in dollars, not necessarily in the existing, EAV, because that CPI number is so low, 0.8%. So really, if this did all pan out and these numbers were exactly as what they said they were gonna be, then we would be looking at an overall tax rate on our operating or cash funds, we call them, of 7.44412, or $46.5 million from the operating levy, and then bond and interest of 0.76875 and 4.8 million. And that number stays the same because they know what we, will need to levy for those bonds. They have it on file, so that number gets levied no matter what. We don't change that number. So then that would be an overall tax rate of 8.21287 for about 51.3 million in totality. So this is more of an idea of what it may look like based on the estimate. So again, this is kind of just real briefly what the difference was between what the levy request was and what we're looking at in terms of the assessor's estimates. So again, I'm not going to go through the number again since I just did that, but again, there is the EAV estimates and what we're saying the tax rate would look like with that estimate. And again, in order to capture all the tax dollars, we're requesting more than that just in case they come up with a higher or lower EAV and or a higher new construction. And again, we're more concerned about the new construction because that's the number that if we don't have high enough, we will not capture those dollars. And so the EAV would have to increase by about 3.17%, and new construction would have to go up to 10 million, which is unlikely, but again, we're just put a little high so we're safe. And then that would create a tax rate of 744,389, which is actually lower because of the higher EAV. And then this is a snapshot of just analyzing from the previous fiscal year our levy request. So we're basically asking for, on the operating levy, that top part, which is levy request, a 2.5% increase over the previous year. It's about a 0.72% of increase in the bond and interest, so a net of 2.33% increase, or about 1.2 million, let's call it, in the levy request. Now, based on the EAV estimates, which is probably more in line with what might actually happen, it would be a 1.4% increase on the operating levy, which is $643,000 in additional dollars in our operating accounts. Bond and interest is the same, so a net of 1.34%, or $677,000. So not an enormous increase. I mean, even for on an actual basis, there's not a lot of extra money coming out of our tax levy.
And remember, this represents what, 60%.
Yeah, of our
all of our revenue. Yeah.
So basically, we, as I mentioned, we record the revenue in our 16-17 fiscal year. So again, being conservative, having the cash in the bank, but not using those funds until we will have expenses in 16-17. So due to the combined decrease in our EAV from 2010 to 14 and how far that's dropped, like I've mentioned before, we've reached our legal maximum rates. And if you remember, there was red in there. That is where we've reached our maximum rates on the spreadsheets. So what we do in order to still get all the dollars that we can get is we increase the transportation levy, because right now, because of a law in the school code, that is not a capped levy. We can put money into the transportation levy, and then what we have been doing, which we've done last year and we have in our budget for this year, is to transfer dollars out of the transportation levy into the usually our ed fund and O&M fund. So that's where we're capturing those dollars right now. So again, that'll require us to do interfund transfers out of the transportation into the other operating funds.
Okay, so when we look at our EAV comparisons, these are important pieces because as we have done with the operation, as we've said, with the city and other agencies throughout DeKalb County, is to try and increase our commercial industrial. And the reason being is right now, as it sits, when you look at the right-hand side, the rate setting EAV, and you see residential at 59%, that's who's taking the burden, the tax burden. It's sitting on our homeowners. What we want to see grow is that green piece of commercial and the industrial piece, the purple piece. The mineral piece is the wind turbines, actually, that came on, I think, 5 years ago or so. But that's where we want to see that growth happen. That's what will help relieve some of the stress to our homeowners, is to divvy that pie up a little more heavier on the side with our commercial industrial happening. So then when we take a look at our tips, and actually, as we said, when you take a look at how this is broken down, so on the left-hand side, we have all this money in TIF, as you see what that value is, $61,354,000, but how that's broken down. So the central area TIF, of which we were just speaking of, that we have the agreement where $2 million comes back on top of that surplus. That's that whole central area TIF. That's what's generating that give back money to the district. That's a piece that does expire in 2021. So that is, you could see, a very large piece of the pie. So when that expires, that will be great because it comes on to us all as new property. Okay, so that'll be a very nice thing to happen. Then we see there is another TIF in DeKalb, TIF number 2, and its value at about $9.4 million if you round up. Malta has a TIF of nearly $3 million, and then Cortland as well. Now on the right-hand side, when we break it down to property type, what's really somewhat odd is how much of that is residential. I mean, a large portion of this for a community, this is somewhat odd that almost 51% of our TIF value sits on residential property. Typically, the majority is on commercial industrial. That's where they TIF. So this is a little more lopsided than usual, but again, it is what it is. The commercial side is 36% of it, industrial is 13.3, and then farm is a little less than 1%.
Andrea, what's the difference between an example between industrial and commercial?
I think commercial's more retail driven.
Yes.
Is it
So that's
retail?
more retail
Office.
stuff. Industrial is really
in
in
office.
offices. Yeah, industrial would be kind of here. Target's out here, 3M's.
Okay.
Doings.
Okay. Thank you.
So here is kind of the, well, it's not kind of, it is a graph of a lot of what we've just seen, but we graphed it so it kind of, you can see all the components here. Basically, the blue bars are rate setting EAV. And again, rate setting EAV is the EAV that's used to establish the tax levy. The difference between the rate setting EAV and the total EAV is the TIF. So that's why you hear rate setting, because that's the one we use. Total EAV is really what is within our district lines, but that also includes TIF dollars. But we don't have access to those yet until the TIFs are filed. So here we just have the blue bars showing our EAV and what has happened, and where we really peaked out in 2009 and then had steady decline. And you can see here what has happened to the limiting tax rate, which is the red line. That has gone up as those EAVs have gone down. The same thing with the bond and interest tax rate, which is on the bottom, the green line. You know, fairly flat, but still slightly increasing. And then that total tax rate, which is the top line, again, continuing to go up. Although when we do get 2015 actuals and we look at this again, we're hoping to see that start to go this way instead of continuing to go that way. And on the bottom here, again, are just some definitions, just so you know what those different components are. That is an important part of the process. Now here is the annual change in equalized assessed values for the school districts in DeKalb County. So it is kind of nice to always look at, okay, are we the only ones, or is everybody feeling the pinch? And of course everybody is, some more than others. And so it really shows us, and then Kingston, Hiawatha, Hinckley, and New Creek, Knox, and Sycamore. And really everybody's been struggling with the decreased EAV values. And, some, recovering a little bit, even in 2014, we can send in a little bit Hinckley and Indian Creek. So hopefully the next year we'll see all positive.
So if the EAV continues to increase, would we see a reduction in the limiting tax rate next year?
We should see it now, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the numbers that the assessor gave us stay true, we will see a reduction in our living tax rate, even in the 2015 tax.
In the 2015?
Yeah, like right now.
Oh.
Mhm. Yeah, not by a ton, but it's definitely will go down a little bit. I think it was like 7.49, and we're going to 7.44. So I mean, it's not
A few cents.
yeah, but it is. Once we see that, that increase in the EAV, that really.
Was there any indication as to what was the driver? Is that is that a hopeful or maybe a possible permanent swing? Or
I think it's a positive.
Yeah.
Maybe not like going up to the.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely in the right direction.
I think when she's putting all the adjustments on the books, it's finally seeing some current sales on the uptick. So that will bring the other profits up as well.
That's good.
Yeah, that's very good. Also because of, like we said, hitting those limiting tax rates. That's where, that gives every school district some heartburn. Because right now where we said where we can fill up that transportation fund, that part of legislation expires or sunsets in 2016. And most districts right now are probably at their caps or have pushed up to those. And without that clause that they have right now to allow us to go into that transportation, we would no longer be able to grab those dollars once we exceed. And we are up at the ceiling on every fund.
Mary, did you have a question?
Yeah, the transportation one, I had, now that you mentioned it, sunsets in 2016. But, so the bond and interest ones, I'm just curious, for that tax rate, what was projected back in 2008 versus what's happening now? How has CPI and EAV affected that? And how true are we staying to what
We're staying true to the dollars.
Okay.
Because, the dollars are going to be the same. It's just the reason why the tax rate has gone up is because the EAV is lower. So it's it's just a definite relationship between those two. So yeah, we're on line with what, we did our bonds for, what we were going to allow levy for a total dollar amount, because that's our debt service. But the rate is really what, just because we were projecting, nobody had projected that this EAV would have dropped like it did, as well as new construction. Even at the time when we were looking at the bond issues, everybody's like, wow, that looks a little conservative, because we were looking at, if we look back, I had the spreadsheet out from like 1997. And if you actually look back at new construction, when we were in, there was one year like $60 million in new construction, 40 million, 30 million. So 20 million seems, knowing that we had some, so when we thought we had some, developments that were going to start, we were like, well, 20 million is a little low, but no, we'll stay conservative. So we thought we were being conservative at the time, when actually, the bottom dropped out. So dollar-wise, we're good. It's just that rate really.
Right, and we expect there to be more new construction to share.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we had builders ready to put the shovel in the ground to build these developments, and everything came to a grinding halt. And that really, the environment that we have been in since the Great Recession, really in 2008, when you look at how the EAV reacted, it takes time for all of that to be built in the EAV, right? So immediately when that hits, you don't see the immediate results in your EAV. And the assessor, actually, it's a 3-year rolling average of when they're assessing properties. So you start to see that value going down by 2010. And then it's been on a steady decline since that. That is completely opposite of what we've seen the last decade or more of how EAVs typically are. In order for that tax rate to increase, you would have to pass a referendum to increase that rate, right? That's the only way you could get a rate increase. Because of the dynamics of the Great Recession, with that EAV dropping, it naturally lifted your tax rate. That's why people were going, well, my values are plummeting. Why isn't my tax bill going down? Because that's just not the way that formula is set up, and that's not how quick that reaction comes. But you could see how slow that rebound is. I mean, we are 5-6 years out, and we are just starting to see a slight uptick from that. So it's a very slow process for all of that to work back in to that equalized assessed valuation.
Yeah, I got a question about the 8%, not 8%, what is it? It's $8 per hundred or something, how does it go? When you look at the limiting tax rate that's built between the bond interest rate and the regular EAV amount. So the actual numbers, you know, when it's a 7.8 or 8.2 or whatever it says, what does it actually indicate?
Now,
It's not percentages,
which
the limiting tax rate.
well, I mean, it is a percentage. Yeah, it basically is.
It is a
It is a
percentage?
percentage. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, they talk about pennies on the dollar, but it's basically, yeah. You basically take that number and times it by the
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm worried about is this perceptual thing. I mean, you talked about developers ready to put a shovel in the ground and all that, right? If I was a developer, I'd be looking at all the different school districts because that's where a large part of the property tax money ends up going. And I'd be looking at the ones that are more efficient, that keep their tax rate down. Understanding that, of course, the school district is going to levy whatever money they think they need up to the limiting rate, right? So when they look across and they see, you know, District 428 and all the others, and they see, oh, it's 8 something, that's not good. I might go build somewhere else, right? So doesn't that give us incentive?
You know what, though, you actually have to walk it through a formula, because if you just look at the rate, it at first glance, it does seem alarming, but when your property values are lower, it could actually generate a lower tax bill.
Sure.
When your values are high, and if we're just $1 or 60 cents off, say something from a neighboring district, you probably are still paying a higher tax bill in that district because those values are higher. See, so if your home value is higher, even if the tax rate is lower than ours, dollar-wise, you still
Because their EAV is
more
higher.
money. Exactly.
Because of the absolute sense
Yeah,
of
you
it's great.
can't just look at the rate. You have
Yeah.
to look at it as a
Yeah.
function of the assessed value, and look at the truly the bottom line value.
Right.
Yeah. It's not as intuitive as one would think. You know, when you just look at that as how your tax bill is then calculated.
Go ahead, Howard.
One thing that I'm not hearing anything about is the overall aging of America and the fact that real estate assessments, when homeowners reach the age of 65, they're entitled to what I think is called a lock. At which point their rates do not go up anymore.
It's the value of the property freezes, but that tax rate changes. So you could, this is where, again, it doesn't make sense. You think, okay, I have a senior freeze. That's a senior freeze on your value. But as this tax rate changes, it's going to fluctuate what your payment is going to be. It doesn't mean I paid $4,000 last year, I'm only going to pay $4,000 next year because I have a freeze. Right? It's your value of your property is being frozen. But as that tax rate moves, you feel the net effect of that. That bill is still going to fluctuate.
But as we move more seniors into home ownership, do we ultimately wind up hurting the tax base and the amount of money that we're able to get because of the freezes and the greater number of them that will be available as the baby boom comes to retirement age?
Yeah, those exemptions do
Raise the higher rate for everybody else.
Right.
I mean, for them too, but it's more impactful because other people have a higher value.
Right. other people will pay. So somebody gets a discount, but the remainder of the people are going to pay.
And we offset this sum by shifting into the industrial and commercial, so that those will never actually receive a freeze, because the actual age of the enterprise is not taken into consideration. And that's why one good reason to want to do it.
Right. And there's no impact to the school district with kids. We love kids, but you know.
Yeah.
From like a 3 hour or something.
We'll take some 8-year-olds, no 5-year-olds.
But in the big picture, Howard's concept that he's thinking of here is really very important, because the tax base across the whole country, not just in this district, must change. I mean, if your income, or rather your expense sheet looks the same, right? But your population's getting older and older, producing less and less, the value of the country is going down, right? The output is going down. That means that whoever's left to produce something is going to have to work harder. So it comes back to buildings in this case, EAV. But the whole big picture, it's all the same game. And he's exactly right. As our population ages, if we continue to have 1.8 or whatever it is kids per family, child-bearing age families, it's going to be a real problem unless us old guys start dying off faster or something. Right? And then the whole game is smaller when that happens. So there's a lot of issues here. It's very complicated.
It is. Any other questions for Andrea or Cindy? All right, so I didn't get a motion before we had the discussion, so we'll go back. That the Board of Education approved the proposed tax levy for the 2015 tax year for publication. So motion?
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Karen in favor? Yes. Mary Hess?
Yes.
Karen Millett?
Yes.
Victoria Newport?
Yes.
Rick Smith?
Yes.
Maurice Simon?
Yes.
Okay. Next, we have the ROE inspection results. This is discussion and informational. Tammy?
Every year, our school buildings are inspected by our DeKalb County Regional Office of Education, and that's consistent practice throughout all county ROEs. And we are just bringing the results from last year's inspections to you. I will say the violations that have come up are things we can manage for the most part, and we have been correcting throughout the school year. We, through most of these, they're done by our own maintenance staff or our custodial staff. It's not something that comes at a great cost to the district, because it is something we do keep up with throughout the year. We know what the rules are, and we hold our staff to those rules to make sure that when the ROE does come in, not something we only do for the week the ROE is here inspecting or the days they're inspecting. It's something we live throughout the year. So the report is just out there so you're able to see what those violations were last year and that we have been working on. We are scheduled for inspections for this year starting December 15th. And this year we have the benefit of having the state fire marshal coming along on the inspections, which as long as I've been here has not taken place. So I am anxious to hear his response in regards to inspecting our buildings, but I just view it as another way that we can make our buildings safer if he finds things that have not been found in the past. So by the end of Christmas break, we will have the inspections completed. It'll take 5 days to go through all of our buildings, and we should have the reports, I would assume, January or February. The preliminary reports gives us the opportunity to make some of the corrections before the final reports are issued, which will then be reported to you again.
Questions for Tammy?
Yeah, I got one serious one and a funny one too. The serious one is, I noticed in the long list that there was often something about emergency lights or exits or something like that, and whether or not they've been tested. That seemed to be checked no a lot of the time, or there was a comment in there or something. What's that about? Don't we have a program? Or
we do. We have logs that we do test these on a monthly basis at all of our buildings. Initially, some of those logs were not provided when the inspection was conducted at that particular building because the head may have not been present that day. So when the preliminary report came out and there were inspection, or it was noted that these were not provided, then we provided them. That is a practice our head custodians, they check our emergency lighting, our exit signs, our fire extinguishers, and our AEDs on a regular basis, and it's logged.
Okay. And I guess there's two serious ones. I just thought of another one, sorry. So the other one is sort of, it could be serious, daisy chain power outlet strips and things like that, right? Obviously, the difference between the new buildings and the older buildings. What are we doing about that? Is there anything, I know we talked about it in subcommittee a long time ago, but anything new that can be talked about or done about?
You know, when we determine that there's a significant need within a classroom, and if the power supply, the building power supply can handle it, at times we have added outlets at locations that are better suited for the equipment that is now placed in the room. We have also invested in longer extension or longer surge protectors, so the cord will stretch longer, so they don't have to have two short ones daisy chained together. And also in situations where we have computer labs, which are requiring, or not so much anymore, it used to require a lot more outlets. We did purchase some large surge protectors that have 10 or 12 spots for plugs rather than the standard 6.
Does the one-to-one help with that situation at all?
I don't know that it helps, that we still have to do charging stations, and there are children whose Chromebooks, I'm sure, come back and are not charged at the time, so they're going to have to be plugged in. It's just something we deal with on a regular basis, and we've been able to work through to the point that we also, as a management team, we do inspections regularly of our buildings on a monthly basis, just to make sure that we are meeting the ROE expectations and fire code expectations, and daisy chains are something we look for. And sometimes it's an accidental thing, someone isn't aware of it, they're just trying to meet their need at that time, and they plug another daisy or another surge protector in, so we provide them with the proper length or size so that it can be avoided as a violation. Yes.
Are the inspection reports per building shared with the staff in that building?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually the head custodian's responsibility to respond with assistance from the principals in their building to the violation report. It's now all automated. It used to be very paper intensive, but now it's a matter of logging on, and that if you notice on some of the comments under the violations that it says that it'll be the head's name and what they did to correct it. Because we do hold the heads responsible for identifying violations throughout the year and either correcting them with the assistance of the principal or getting facilities management involved in correcting those. And if there's a violation, we do have them be held responsible. And if they can't correct it themselves because it's beyond their level of expertise, then they are expected to put in a work order. And in that work order, it's very specific that it's an ROE work order, and so those get the higher priority of attention.
Mary, go ahead. I just want to say, I thought it was very impressive for the extensive boxes and those checklists that we're compliant with, the vast majority of things, and I think that says a lot for you and your staff that, we're up to code and making sure that we're following those things, because it could have been much, much worse. So.
Oh, very much. So we've come a long way in recent years. Again, making it responsibility of the head custodians to keep their eyes open at all times, and keeping the staff educated at all times of what these are.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just they didn't know that this wasn't allowed, and they came from maybe a private sector where it was okay to do this. Mm-hmm. And now once they're made aware of it, we do address it at the beginning of the year, and if necessary throughout the year, we'll send out reminders of kind of the key violations that happen more frequently that staff can help us in correcting. Thank you.
The funny one.
Okay, yeah.
It's like there was something in there about this building and the floor being waxed. You remember that? What was that about? There's a comment in there. I'll have to show it later.
Well, the only floor that gets waxed in this building is the kitchen. So I'm not sure what that would have been
That's kind of a
about.
cryptic remark about it. I got, what is this? So
I'd have to look into that one.
At one point in here, I've seen reference to ground fault interruption systems used in conjunction with electrical power, and possibly some situations where you're looking at daisy chains and things along that line. How is a ground fault interruption system going to be functional if the excess amount of current being pulled through a daisy chain is actually continuing to be pulled through? In other words, do we have why? I don't know that the codes for GFI have ever established that their appropriate use is for power overload. It has always been for the presence of water. So why are we anticipating using it for power overload?
Well, the GFI that I recall from reports has to do with, we have some old outlets that are too close to sinks.
Okay.
And they have to, if it's within, I believe it's 3 feet, it could be a little further, I'd have to look at the code. Certain distance from a sink or a water source, it has to be a GFI. And over the years, we have been identifying more and more of these, because obviously not everything is caught through every inspection. But we're identifying those and swapping those out for GFI outlets. Surge protectors have to be a specific type of surge protector, not just, and it has to have that trip option so that if something blows, it will blow at the surge protector level rather than electrical inside it.
How close to completion of changing everything that needs to be GFI are we in terms of percentage?
I would say we're probably right close to 99% after this many years, because at this point has become more of a hot topic with our staff, and because it has been identified by the ROE, we know where our sinks are, we wash them all the time, so they know to keep their eyes open and make sure that there is a GFI if there's an outlet close by.
Any other questions for Tammy? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next is the life safety inspection results. This is informational. Tammy?
Thank you. I would like to introduce Scott Johnson. Scott is the architect that we contract with, Richard L. Johnson and Associates, and him and as well as his staff members are the ones who conducted this survey. You may recall back earlier in this year that we presented that it was time to do 10-year life safety inspections at all of our buildings except for Portland and the high school because they are not 10 years of age yet. And we opted to contract with Richard L. Johnson to complete those. The 10-year life safety surveys are a requirement of the state every 10 years, as you would expect. And it's somewhat, I would describe it kind of as a glorified ROE inspection, and it's much more detailed, and they crawl in areas that we do not during the ROE inspections to verify the safety of our equipment in our buildings. What we're presenting today in my report to you in the board rec, I kind of outlined the different things that were considered, that were looked at, and then Scott has prepared the report of the violations. There are 2 codes assigned to those. Actually, there's 3, but I think only one item of ours has the C on it. A codes and B codes for priority. A are items that have to be corrected within 1 year. B have to be corrected within 5 years. And as they are corrected, we report back to our architect. Scott then reports to Izzy.
We'll report to the Regional Office of Education. So we'll do once all the items are completed for each school, we'll do a completion statement signing off that everything's complete, compliant, and then we get that to the ROE.
So in your packet, there's very detailed reports on each of the buildings. Scott has also provided us with just some other recommendations that are not necessarily violations, but things he identified that we could potentially correct. And we're working on those also. We do plan to work on the A violations throughout this year, depending on the costs involved within our budget. But the A violations will be completed next summer after we get into our new fiscal budget after July 1st. And then the Bs will be spread out through the remaining 4 years. The good thing I thought with looking at this, I know that when I looked at the items and the violations, many of them, the majority of them, as you'll see on the spreadsheet I provided you, the summary spreadsheet, the majority of those can be completed by our staff. And the numbers and the costs that are presented by the architect's office are actually our contracts or bid out numbers, so that there's architectural costs, there's bid costs, there's engineering costs. They're embedded into those. And when it's completed by our own staff, obviously the labor is cheaper and we buy the materials and supplies that we needed. So in the spreadsheet I prepared, I've kind of dumbed it down about 25% if it's something that our staff can complete without involving outside contractors. I did try to group them for you because to me it was interesting to see that how many were emergency lighting and how many were strobe lights and those type of things and where those costs are going to lie. And if you're wondering why all of a sudden do we need emergency lighting in areas we didn't before, the use of the room may have changed. Or it may not have been identified as a violation in previous years. There's right things as the buildings have aged that were not required in the past. And we do try to identify those as uses of rooms to change, but there are times that we don't get it identified and we don't get them installed. So that's what Scott's job is to let us know those things that we do need to get back up to speed in regards to those violations.
As far as the lists go, the total, what was the dollar amount, Tammy, you have that handy, the total roughly?
What I believe with our costs, once we have not contracting everything out, we're at $243,000.
Yeah, and that's amazing for the amount of buildings you have. So you guys, on a yearly basis, have really kept your buildings up, renovated them, bringing up the new codes. I was at a district last night, they just have 2 buildings, and their total was $400,000 worth of items. So you can congratulate the maintenance staff and the department on keeping your buildings up to code. I mean, we're gonna see some things more than the ROE is gonna see. They're gonna do their walkthroughs every year, but everybody looks at different things. So we look at some things maybe the ROE doesn't look at, but it's more of an exhaustive survey like Tammy said. But in general, you guys are doing great with the buildings.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you. This will have to come up back to the next meeting for approval as part of the requirements of the 10-year life safety survey. But at that time, if you have further questions,
Here he is.
Yeah, I got a question, kind of conceptual thing. Thinking about redistricting, we're having these forums and so on, and 10-year inspections. Have you got any idea how things might change over that length of time, over 10 years, as a result of growth in the district or shuffling students from, you talked about classroom changing, for instance, you might have to put a GFI where there did used to be a sink or something like that, right? Is there any kind of a way that we could know or project, estimate what might be necessary? I mean, if it's $200,000 for this kind of condition in the next 5 years with this much growth, according to the demographer or whatever, is there any way that we could say, oh, we better allow this kind of money to make these possible changes? Is there any way to benchmark anything like that?
I don't know if there's a benchmark or if Scott has an idea. I look at it this way with our older buildings, especially the ones that were just reviewed. We are using every space possible in these buildings. We have, over the last 10 years, changed closets to offices and therapy rooms and different things. That those are the uses of rooms that have changed significantly. That used to be storage room, and now we've put a sight glass in the door, and it's now a space that students are seeing in. I can't imagine that there is any hidden space in any building that we can really convert to a space that would require additional type of safety precautions. Can they change? Well, as an example, carbon monoxide detectors. Or those who would have guessed, even 6 months ago or a year ago, now we're going to be required as of January 1 to start installing carbon monoxide detectors within 20 feet of any gas-fired appliance. Now, that's going to be a cost to the district. If I miss some and I don't get them into place, either through ROE or through a 10-year life safety, they're going to come back to me and it's going to be on that report. Could there be changes or requirements that we have no idea what to foresee? Yeah, absolutely. Can I tell you what it's going to cost us? Not really. We will have 10-year life safety inspections on Cortland and the high school. That will probably be in 2018-19 when Cortland is getting near its 10-year mark. We'll do both of them together. You'll see Tyler didn't have any violations this year because it's pretty much a new building. It was remodeled to code, so. Yeah, otherwise we'd be talking to the architect right now. But I'm sorry to say, I wish I had that crystal ball. All I can say is we will continue to keep up and correct ROE violations as they are brought to our attention, and anything else that we know needs to be addressed from a fire safety or life safety standpoint.
Right, thank you, Tammy. Next is a non-business consent agenda. The Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through G. Do you have a motion? Moved. Any discussion? All right, roll call please.
Mary Hess? Yes. Carrie Millett?
Yes.
Victoria Newport?
Yes.
Rick Smith?
Yes.
Howard Solomon?
Yes.
Vicky Herman Favor?
Yes. Okay. Next up is business consent, sorry,
Oh.
go ahead.
I'd just like, with the approval of that, the personnel agenda item, I'd like to introduce our new community relations intern, Marilyn Kuntz is with us this evening. Marilyn will be meeting with all the principals, and she did a great job. I'll say pro bono because you weren't officially hired yesterday. George McCaskey was visiting Lisa Fearbach's classroom at Brooks Elementary School, and Marilyn was over there, got some great pictures, wrote a nice little article about it. He was there to talk about leadership and literacy, and she was there to document it all, and she sent it out to multiple media sources. So we're real happy and believe this is going to really help us a lot in getting the good news that's taking place in the district out to the community. So welcome, Marilyn.
Next is business consent agenda, that the Board of Education approve business consent agenda items A through F. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion?
I just have a question for Tammy. Where'd she go?
Where's she going?
All right, well, maybe one of you can answer this, because it goes back to the city of DeKalb, the TIP agreement. So in that TIP agreement, there's something about the Clinton Rosettes, HVAC, but that wasn't in the request of it.
I don't know that all the projects listed on here right now were out for bid. I think we chose some priority ones.
Because I think that's the only one that wasn't, so I just wanted to verify.
That didn't go out.
Because there's 4 in our.
That was at
Right.
750,000. And I know when we were at FFAC, we talked about this. But again.
That's okay. I was just wondering, so we're voting on the approval of request of the TIP funding projects, and I noticed in the TIP agreement that we voted on, or that Andrea went over earlier, that contains a piece about redoing something with the HVAC.
Oh, as an alternate.
Oh, that's gonna be an alternate?
Yes,
So
that
we're not
was,
bidding that now?
no, we are not, you're saying for Clinton Rosette, correct?
Yes.
Yes, that was, we were asked to provide much more than $2 million of projects when we were in first discussions with them for these buildings, so we gave a significant amount, I think we doubled, actually.
Well, we came to 2.6 million.
But there were even more on top of that we gave them that we didn't put in your presentation. What that was with Clinton Rosette is when the upstairs used to be open concept, the entire upstairs. Then walls and doors were put up all over the place, and the ductwork was never redone. So because of that, we have hot and cold spots throughout the building because it's not ducted properly, and so the temperature controls are not always easy to manage.
Okay.
My recommendation at that point was if we had TIF funding and they wanted more than that was projects, because maybe they wanted, the city may not allow, let's say, the roofs, they wanted something else. This gave us another option in one of the buildings as a potential project.
So if these projects come in lower, then we can potentially move forward with that.
Right. Yes. So the intent is to try and hit as close as we can to the 2 million, if not perhaps a little over that.
Okay.
Right. We listed 2.6 million because all these right now have not gone to bid, and they are just sheer estimates.
Okay. So we're not obligated to do everything that was in that agreement with the city?
No,
Okay.
no, not at all. We are going to be staying, because we're not looking to use O&M funding for anything beyond the 2 million, except in a small dollar amount if we had to.
Okay.
And keeping in mind, these can go over two summers of
Right.
projects. So what we're bidding now, we'll know what the balance is of that 2 million after we get through these projects. Sure. We'll know how much we have to bid out for the following year, and I'll be in front of you a year from now, hopefully, and saying, we have more money and this is what we'd like to spend.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I got a question, generic question about TIFs in the city and so on. When you give them, 10 projects, that come up with 150% of the available money, Does the city have any say in what projects we want to do?
No. They have, as we were saying, actually, when we first submitted, we submitted probably about $4 million. And in there were some projects with carpeting replacement or flooring and things like that. Their suggestion back to us was that is more cosmetic type things, and the TIF really should be for more facility structural enhancements or replacements. So we let go of those projects and put on what really was more of what TIF appropriate defined project reimbursements would look like.
So then their part is in review of the projects we proposed so that they qualify with whatever the statute says that you
Yes.
can spend things on for a TIF. Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call. Roll call?
Carrie Miller.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Vicky Hernandez.
Yes.
Mary Hess.
Yes. Next, we have new business and administration. Recommended revisions to Board of Education policy, first reading. And this is an informational item. Discussion on that?
Yes.
Okay.
This is approximately 42 pages worth of changes that are being proposed from downstate. No, the press that we get is published generally across state policies, and then we buy into it through our agreement is the basic idea.
Right.
And I'm finding some things in there that are questionable, but going over 42 pages of legalese is a project that I don't want to try to undertake on my own, to try to make everything appropriate. And was wondering if we could somehow or other divide that up and let our responsibilities give each of us 8 pages or 7 pages or something, so that we come back to the next discussion with a little better idea of some of the things that we're looking for. For instance, I'm finding in section 5, under staff development program, there's a mandate for online concussion certification. Now, why should online concussion certification be mandated for those who are already taking on-the-ground, face-to-face concussion certification? These are the kinds of questions that I think need to be raised, but there's a lot of them that are in there. There's a lot of things that we might try to find, and if we were to look at this thing as individuals on a smaller piece of it, we may be able to find more of what we need to look at and assent to, and talk about it more reasonably and rationally.
Yeah, the IASB employs a lot of lawyers to handle this stuff, so they can catch the changes in the school codes and the new requirements coming out of the legislature and get them in the board policy in an appropriate and consistent way. And we pay them to do that for us, so that we are.
And can we recover some of that money, because they clearly aren't doing it very well? For instance, they've taken and stricken out the words English language learners under section 6160. Now, an English language learner is somebody who is learning the English language. They've insisted that it be replaced by English learners. Anybody familiar with the language that I'm familiar with is called English will recognize an English learner is a learner from England. We have none of them. And they need to actually use this stuff in language that human beings can use, not the language of the lawyers downstate, regardless of how many of them there are.
Well, the problem with, I understand your frustration, Howard, but here's the thing. I didn't go to law school, and I'm not qualified to do this. I'm not. I mean, I could probably make it work, and then Gino and Tony would come and beat me in the head. But
You're qualified to know that you don't understand anything after all the legalese that they put in and tried to straighten it
Well,
out.
but I think what they're trying to do is write policy that protects both the students and the district and put it out there in a fair and consistent way. And I don't, I just
No, that's
help me
right.
out.
I agree with
Help me out,
Vicki. I
Doug.
don't think any of us are qualified to go through 42 pages or 8 or however we divvy it up. And make,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not,
Maybe Doug can speak to the.
Well,
school
I just, with regards to the consistency between changes in school code and then obviously the press
Yeah.
releases that are vetted through the ISB legal counsel. We can say we don't agree with them, we can say we're gonna, no, we want this language instead of that language. But the more we deviate, the less likely, if we are challenged on some policy, we will not have the support of the Illinois Association of School Boards. Whereas if we're using the language which they recommend, we would have their backing.
The downstate group now consists of Tony Smith as the superintendent,
State superintendent of
state
schools, yes.
superintendent, and we have a new governor. Has the appointment of Tony Smith impacted who is on the IASB? Has any of that been changed?
No, not at all.
Is any of it subject to political will and things like that?
No, it's a completely different organization.
Okay. Why I asked.
so do we have a consensus then that we want to continue to, or to keep what's in the 42 pages right now?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
I think Howard has a point, but also I agree with what you said. I mean, unless you're a trained attorney, you're probably best going with their recommendation because they are trained. If you get into litigation, that's what the standard will be, of course. But I do agree with Howard. It is frustrating. Sometimes you read these things and either you can't understand or you think you understand, or you think something's wrong. You know, so there is a.
Well, why didn't we do that?
If I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you're free to call IASB with questions.
Certainly.
Log into their website, you go to the training, the
Yes.
board training, so they should have given you a way to log into their website and look at all the press policies. And you can find a lot of information there.
Well, I can find the information, I can find the policies just fine. What I can't find is the reasoning behind them.
Well, sometimes if you look at the bottom of those policies, it'll cite that there was a change in the statute, and it'll give you, it'll say like 5 ILCS, whatever, all the school codes in 5 ILCS. It'll cite it at the bottom of the page.
Because chances are that online concussion training is something state legislature passed and we have to.
It's an unfunded mandate.
This reminds me of case law. I mean, you look at a statute and it seems to be pretty straightforward, and then you watch it being applied, and then something happens, and then you go to litigation, then you go to court, then there's case law, then you argue the next case, not only based on the statute or an organization like ISB's perspective, but also the whole body of case law. So it gets to be really crazy, you know, and that's why you have to be a trained attorney to really know all this stuff and to know what will win, you know, in a court setting. So I don't like it, but it is the way that it is. You know, and I would have to say you have to lean on these guys. You have to hire them and trust them.
And with the passage of Senate Bill 100, which we discussed, there'll be a lot more press releases about changes with regards to student discipline and exclusionary practices from school.
Okay, well, as long as there is an outlet somewhere by which we can try to straighten out the things that we do need straightening out.
I believe when you do go in online, there is a number, contact number for support information.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, we end our open meeting. In about 5 minutes and we'll go into closed session. Okay, all right, thank you, everybody.
You missed you on that.